They called her the Grey Mouse of Hollywood. For 3 years, Serafina Angela walked exactly 3 steps behind her husband, Harrison, the golden boy of the box office. She was the accessory he forgot to wear, the plain Jane the tabloids loved to pity. But on the night of the prestigious Celestia Gala, amidst the blinding flash of 10,000 cameras, the script got flipped. 1 minute she was the rejected wife, left standing alone in the cold while her husband posed with his co-star mistress. The next, she was revealed as the sole heiress to a legacy that could buy Harrison's entire career 10 times over. This isn't just a breakup story. This is the story of how the mouse roared, how a billion-dollar secret was kept for love, and how the red carpet turned into a battlefield. The air inside the stretch limousine was colder than the New York winter outside. It wasn't the air conditioning. It was the man sitting across from Serafina. Harrison Angela checked his reflection in the darkened window for the 10th time in 2 minutes. He adjusted his bow tie, a velvet Tom Ford piece that cost more than Serafina's first car, and ran a hand through his perfectly coiffed sandy blonde hair. He didn't look at her. He rarely looked at her these days, unless he needed to critique something. "You're actually wearing that?" Harrison asked, his voice dripping with that familiar casual cruelty. He finally deigned to glance at her, his blue eyes narrowing as they swept over her dress. Serafina smoothed the fabric of her gown. It was a deep midnight blue silk cut in a classic modest A-line. No sequins, no feathers, no sheer cutouts. To the untrained eye, it was boring. To Serafina, it was armor. It was a vintage piece from the 1950s, sourced from a private collection in Paris, but she knew Harrison wouldn't care about the history. He only cared about the headlines. "It's elegant, Harrison," she said softly, her voice barely rising above the hum of the engine. "And it fits the theme. Gilded Age minimalism. The theme is opulence, Serafina." Harrison snapped, checking his phone. The screen lit up with a message from V. Serafina looked away, her heart tightening in her chest. Verity. Verity Vane. His co-star in the upcoming blockbuster Titan's Fall. The woman who had been liking every single one of his Instagram posts at 3 a.m. The woman the tabloids were already calling his soulmate. "Verity is wearing a custom Versace made of actual gold mesh," Harrison muttered, typing a furious reply. "She understands the assignment. She knows how to sell a movie. You look like you're going to a funeral for a librarian." "I am your wife, Harrison, not your prop," Serafina said, a rare spark of defiance igniting in her chest. "I'm not here to sell a movie. I'm here to support you." Harrison laughed, a harsh, dry sound. "Support me." "You're an anchor, Sarah. A dead weight. Do you know what my publicist Jessica told me this morning? She said my Q rating drops every time I'm photographed with you. You have no brand, no sparkle. And tonight of all nights, I need sparkle." The limo began to slow down. Through the tinted windows, the chaotic strobe lights of the paparazzi were already visible, flashing like lightning in a bottle. The Celestia Gala was the biggest night of the year. The Metropolitan Museum had been transformed into a fortress of exclusivity. Harrison leaned forward, his face inches from hers. For a second, she thought he might kiss her, apologize for the cruelty. Instead, he gripped her wrist, his fingers digging into her skin. "Listen to me," he hissed. "Do not embarrass me out there. Stay back. Don't try to hold my hand unless I reach for you. And for God's sake, try to smile. You look miserable." "I am miserable, Harrison," she whispered, pulling her wrist away. Well, fake it. He straightened his jacket. That's what everyone else does. The car came to a halt. The door was pulled open by a white-gloved attendant, and the roar of the crowd rushed in a wall of sound, screaming names, demanding attention. "Showtime," Harrison said, his face instantly transforming. The sneer vanished, replaced by the dazzling million-dollar smile that had charmed the world. He stepped out, waving to the crowd, basking in the adoration. Serafina took a deep breath. She reached for her clutch, a small, heavy object encrusted with sapphires that had belonged to her grandmother. She stepped out into the blinding light, expecting Harrison to wait for her, to offer his arm, as he had done when they were first married. But Harrison was already 6 feet away, walking toward the press line. He hadn't waited, and he wasn't alone. The red carpet at the Celestia Gala was less a walkway and more of a gladiator arena. It was a sea of crimson velvet, flanked by tiered rows of photographers who screamed commands like drill sergeants. "Harrison, over here, to the left. The left. Give us the smile. Yes, king of the box office." Serafina stepped onto the carpet, the midnight blue silk of her dress swallowing the light rather than reflecting it. She felt small. She took a step toward her husband, reaching out a hand. "Harrison," she murmured, trying to close the gap. But Harrison had stopped. He had stopped because someone else had just arrived. A sleek silver sports car had pulled up right behind their limo, violating the usual protocol of staggered arrivals. The door opened, and a leg emerged, long, tanned, and glistening with shimmer oil. It was Verity Vane. The crowd erupted. The scream was deafening, twice as loud as it had been for Harrison. Verity stood up, and she was indeed wearing gold. It was a dress that left almost nothing to the imagination, a masterwork of engineering that clung to her curves like molten metal. She tossed her platinum blonde hair, scanned the crowd, and locked eyes with Harrison. It was choreographed. Serafina realized it instantly. The timing, the car placement, the look. This wasn't an accident. Harrison turned his back on Serafina completely. He opened his arms, and Verity practically ran into them, greeting him with a kiss on the cheek that lingered a second too long, a kiss that screamed intimacy. "Harrison, Verity together! Get close!" the photographers roared. Harrison wrapped his arm around Verity's waist, pulling her flush against him. They posed a perfect, golden couple. The king and the queen of the industry. Serafina stood 3 feet away, frozen. She was in the frame, but only as an obstruction. "Hey, you lady in the blue!" a photographer shouted from the front row. It was a man Serafina recognized, Gary Gloom, a notorious paparazzo, who had once called her Harrison's spare tire in a headline. "Move it. You're blocking the shot." Serafina flinched as if slapped. She looked at Harrison, pleading with her eyes for him to intervene, to claim her. "I am your wife," she thought. "Acknowledge me." Harrison heard the shout. He glanced over his shoulder at Serafina. His eyes were cold, devoid of recognition. He made a subtle shooing motion with his hand, a gesture one might use to dismiss a servant or a stray dog. "Give us a second, guys," Harrison shouted charmingly to the press. Then he leaned toward Serafina, his voice a low ventriloquist whisper that the cameras couldn't pick up. "Go inside, Sarah. You're ruining the aesthetic. Go." "Harrison, please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Don't do this." "I said move." Verity giggled, covering her mouth with a diamond-clad hand. "Oh, poor thing," she said, loud enough for the front row to hear. "She looks lost, Harrison. Maybe you should call her an Uber." The reporters closest to them laughed. "Move out of the frame, sweetheart," another photographer yelled. "We need the power couple." Humiliation, hot and acidic, flooded Serafina's veins. Her face burned. She felt tears pricking the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She was an Eau Claire, even if none of them knew it. Eau Claires did not cry in front of the help. And right now, Harrison Angela was acting like nothing more than hired help. She took a step back, then another. She retreated to the edge of the carpet near the velvet ropes where the Nobody's agents, publicists, and assistants stood. From the sidelines, she watched her husband of 3 years enact a public betrayal. He held Verity's hand. He whispered in her ear, making her laugh, that practiced, tinkling laugh. They worked the line, soaking up the flashes. "Is the rumor true, Harrison?" A reporter from E! News shouted, thrusting a microphone over the barrier. "Are the on-screen sparks real?" Harrison winked. Actually, winked. "Let's just say, chemistry is hard to fake, and I'm a man who appreciates quality." Serafina felt a hand on her shoulder. She jumped, turning to see a young production assistant with a headset, looking at her with pity. "Ma'am," the girl said, "if you're not talent, you really need to clear the carpet. You're confusing the lighting guys. The entrance for guests is around the side." The side entrance. The entrance for the donors who weren't famous, the staff, and the +1s who didn't matter. Serafina looked at the PA, then back at Harrison, who was now adjusting the strap of Verity's dress with intimate familiarity. Something inside Serafina snapped. It wasn't a loud snap like a bone breaking. It was a quiet click, like a lock turning. For 3 years she had hidden who she was. She had lived a quiet life because she wanted to be loved for herself, not her father's billions. She wanted a normal life. She had thought Harrison loved the quiet girl from the bookstore. She realized now that Harrison didn't love the girl. He loved the adoration she gave him, and now that he had a bigger source of adoration, she was disposable. She looked down at her boring blue dress. She touched the sapphire clutch. "No," Serafina said to the PA. Her voice was different now. The tremble was gone. It was replaced by a tone of steel, the tone her father used when he was about to acquire a competitor. "Excuse me?" the PA asked, confused. "I said no," Serafina said, straightening her spine. She grew an inch taller, her chin lifted. "I won't be using the side entrance, and I won't be clearing the carpet. Ma'am, security will—" "Security isn't going to do anything," Serafina said calmly. She looked toward the far end of the arrival zone, where the barricades were suddenly being moved. The atmosphere on the red carpet shifted. The photographers stopped shouting at Harrison. The flashes died down. A strange hush fell over the crowd, a vibration in the air that signaled the arrival of true power. Harrison and Verity paused, sensing the shift. They turned to look down the carpet. "Who is that?" Verity asked, annoyed that the cameras were no longer pointed at her. "Is it Beyoncé?" It wasn't Beyoncé. Rolling slowly toward the carpet was a convoy of 3 matte black SUVs. They weren't the standard limos provided by the event sponsors. These were armored military-grade vehicles with diplomatic flags fluttering on the hoods. The lead car bore a crest on the door, a stylized hawk clutching a golden gear. A murmur rippled through the veteran photographers. They knew that crest. They rarely saw it, but they knew it. Holy! Gary Gloom lowered his camera, his mouth hanging open. Is that the Eau Claire crest? Eau Claire? Harrison frowned. Who the hell is Eau Claire? Money. a reporter next to him whispered, looking terrified. Real money. Not Hollywood money. World-ending money. The lead SUV stopped exactly where Harrison's limo had been. The back door didn't just open. It was opened by a man in a tailored suit who looked more like a Secret Service agent than a chauffeur. A man stepped out. He was in his 60s, with silver hair slicked back and a beard trimmed to geometric perfection. He wore a tuxedo that made Harrison's Tom Ford look like a rental. He carried a cane topped with a diamond the size of a golf ball. It was Alistair Auclair, the Iron Baron. The man who owned the steel mills that built the city, the tech firms that ran the data, and the shipping lines that moved the world. He was a recluse who hadn't been seen at a public gala in 20 years. The silence was absolute. Even the screaming fans were quiet. Alistair didn't look at the cameras. He didn't look at the screaming masses. He walked straight onto the red carpet, his cane clicking rhythmically on the ground. He walked right past Harrison Angela, ignoring him as if he were a piece of furniture. He walked past Verity Vane, who tried to flash a smile, and was met with a gaze so icy, she physically shivered. Alistair walked until he reached the sidelines, until he reached the woman standing by the velvet ropes in the midnight blue dress. He stopped in front of Serafina. The world held its breath. Alistair Auclair bowed. It wasn't a mocking bow. It was a deep, courtly bow of respect. He extended his hand. "I believe," Alistair said, his voice booming in the silence, amplified by the stunned quiet of the crowd, "that you have kept me waiting, my dear." Serafina looked at her father. She looked back at Harrison, whose face had gone pale with confusion. She looked at Verity, whose mouth was gaping open. Serafina smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "I'm sorry, Papa," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I was just taking out the trash." She placed her hand in Alistair's. "Shall we?" Alistair asked. "We shall," she replied. As they turned to walk down the center of the carpet, Alistair signaled to his security detail. 2 men stepped forward, carrying a large velvet-covered case. "Wait!" Harrison shouted, his ego finally overriding his confusion. He stepped forward, grabbing Serafina's arm again. "Sarah, what is this? Who is this old man?" The security guards moved instantly, but Alistair raised a hand to stop them. He looked at Harrison's hand on his daughter's arm. "Remove your hand," Alistair said quietly, "or you will never use it to sign an autograph again." Harrison snatched his hand back, as if burned. She's my wife. I don't know who you think you are." "She was your wife," Alistair corrected. "Now she is the chairwoman of Auclair Industries, and I am the man who just bought the studio that produces your movies." Alistair turned to the photographers, who were now frantically trying to reload their memory cards. "Gentlemen," Alistair announced, "you wanted opulence, you wanted royalty, you were ignoring the only queen on this carpet." He turned to Serafina. "The reveal, my dear." Serafina reached for the shoulder clasp of her boring blue dress. With a single tug, the dark silk cape dropped to the floor. Underneath was not a plain dress. The heavy midnight blue silk pooled on the red carpet like a shadow cast aside. What remained standing in the glare of the flashbulbs was not a grey mouse. It was a supernova. Serafina was wearing a gown that defied physics and price tags. It was a sheath of sheer architectural tulle, but the fabric was almost invisible. Instead, her body seemed to be draped in liquid starlight. The dress was hand-embroidered, not with sequins, but with thousands of raw, uncut diamonds and threads of pure platinum. It caught the chaotic light of the paparazzi flashes and refracted it, creating a halo around her that was almost blinding. On her chest, resting against her skin like a cold fire, was the Eau Claire heart, a 50-carat blue diamond that had been missing from the public eye since an auction in Geneva in 1995. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the arrival zone. Even the jaded photographers lowered their lenses for a split second, stunned by the sheer aggressive display of wealth. This wasn't just fashion. This was a war chest worn as clothing. "Holy mother of," Gary Gloom whispered, zooming his lens in so tight he could see the facets of the diamonds. "That's the GDP of a small country." Harrison Angela stood frozen. His mouth hung slightly open, destroying his carefully practiced smolder. He looked at the woman he had just told to leave via the side entrance. He looked at the dress that made Verity's gold mesh look like costume jewelry from a mall kiosk. "Sarah." Harrison choked out, his voice cracking. Verity Vane's face had twisted into a mask of ugly shock. She looked down at her own dress, then at Serafina's. She realized with dawning horror that she was standing next to the sun, holding a flashlight. She instinctively took a step away from Harrison, sensing the shift in the wind. Alistair Eau Claire stepped forward, placing a protective hand on his daughter's back. He looked directly at the bank of cameras, his eyes hard as flint. "For 3 years," Alistair's voice boomed, silencing the chatter, "my daughter chose to live simply. She wanted to be known for her heart, not her inheritance. She wanted to see who would love her for Serafina, not for the Eau Claire empire." Alistair turned his gaze slowly, deliberately toward Harrison. The cameras followed his eyes. Harrison felt the lens of every camera burn into his skin. He felt naked. "We have our answer," Alistair said, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "Harrison Angela found a diamond in the rough and treated it like a piece of coal." "Wait, no." Harrison stammered, his hands raising in a pathetic gesture of defense. He forced a smile, turning to the cameras. This is a misunderstanding, Sarah, baby. Tell them we're playing a game, right? This is a bit..." He lunged forward, trying to close the distance, trying to reclaim the narrative. "Sarah, you look beautiful. I always knew you had it in you. Come here, let's get a photo." Harrison reached for her waist. Crack. The sound wasn't a bone, but it was close. One of Alistair's security guards, a man built like a tank, had stepped in with lightning speed. He didn't hit Harrison. He simply intercepted his arm with a grip of iron, stopping him mid-stride. "Do not touch the chairwoman," the guard said. His voice was flat, professional, and terrifying. "Chairwoman." Harrison blinked, sweat beading on his forehead, despite the cold. Serafina finally spoke. She didn't look at Harrison. She looked at the cameras. She looked straight into the lens of the camera, broadcasting live to the giant screens in Times Square. "My name," she said, her voice clear, melodic, and icy, "is Serafina Eau Claire, and I am announcing tonight that Eau Claire Industries has acquired a controlling stake in Paramount Zenith Studios." The crowd screamed. Paramount Zenith was Harrison's studio. It was the studio producing Titan's Fall. It was the studio that signed his paychecks. Serafina turned her head slowly, finally acknowledging her husband. Her eyes were dry. The sadness was gone, replaced by a terrifying calm. "I hear the studio is looking to cut costs, Harrison," she said, a faint, cruel smile playing on her lips. "I wonder if they still need a leading man whose Q rating just dropped through the floor." Harrison turned pale. "Sarah, you can't. You wouldn't." "I would," she said softly. You wanted sparkle, Harrison. You wanted a brand. Well, congratulations. You're now the man who fumbled the biggest bag in Hollywood history. Shall we go inside, chairwoman? Alistair asked, offering his arm again. Yes, Papa. It's getting a bit crowded with the B-list out here. Serafina took her father's arm. They swept past Harrison and Verity, the train of her diamond-encrusted dress, dragging over the red carpet with a heavy, expensive hiss. Harrison was left standing in the wake of her perfume. The cameras were still flashing, but they weren't taking glamour shots anymore. They were taking pictures of his face, the face of a man who had just lost everything. Harrison! Gary Gloom shouted, laughing. Look over here, give us a smile. How does it feel to be the ex-Mr. Auclair? Harrison swatted at a camera, his composure shattering. Get that camera out of my face! Verity Vane, realizing the ship was sinking, made her move. I have to go to the bathroom, she muttered, unlinking her arm from Harrison's and sprinting toward the entrance, leaving him completely alone. The inside of the Metropolitan Museum of Art was a sanctuary of gold leaf, towering floral arrangements, and the soft hum of string quartets. It was designed to be a place of relaxation for the elite, but tonight the air was thick with tension. News traveled faster than light in these circles. By the time Serafina and Alistair cleared the security checkpoint and entered the great hall, every phone in the room had lit up. The Grey Mouse is an Auclair. Harrison Angela is finished. Who is the new owner of Zenith? The room went silent as they entered. It was a biblical silence. A-list actresses, tech billionaires, and politicians stopped mid-sip of their champagne. All eyes turned to the woman in the diamond dress. Before tonight, Serafina had been invisible in this room. She had stood by the buffet table while Harrison networked, holding his drink, holding his jacket. People had bumped into her without apologizing. Now the crowd parted like the Red Sea. Serafina. The voice came from Rupert Stone, the CEO of Paramount Zenith Studios. He was a small, frantic man who usually treated Serafina like furniture. Now he was sweating profusely, sprinting across the marble floor with a glass of wine shaking in his hand. Serafina. Or should I say, Ms. Auclair? Rupert gasped, skidding to a halt in front of them. He bowed, actually bowed. My goodness, you look transcendent, absolutely transcendent. I had no idea. Why didn't you tell us? We would have sent a car. We would have sent a helicopter. Serafina looked down at him. Hello, Rupert. You didn't send a car because last week, when I asked for an extra ticket for my sister, you told Harrison that +1s don't get +1s. Rupert turned the colour of a beet. A joke. A terrible, dry British joke. I have a terrible sense of humour. Everyone knows that. He looked at Alistair, trembling. Mr. Auclair, sir. An honour. A true honour. I assume the rumours of a hostile takeover are exaggerated. Alistair tapped his diamond cane on the floor. Clack. I don't do hostile, Mr. Stone. I do absolute. My daughter will be reviewing the studio's slate of upcoming films on Monday. I suggest you have your books in order. Monday, Rupert squeaked. But Titan's Fall is in post-production. We need to lock the marketing budget. We'll discuss the marketing budget, Serafina said coolly, especially the casting. I feel the lead actor lacks authenticity. Rupert gulped. Understood. Completely understood. We can recast, reshoot, whatever you need. Good to know, she said, dismissing him with a turn of her head. As they moved deeper into the room, Serafina felt the shift in reality. Women who had sneered at her dress sense were now complimenting her bold avant-garde aesthetic. Producers who had ignored her were trying to catch her eye. But she wasn't looking for them. She was waiting. She knew he would come. And he did. 10 minutes later, Harrison found her. He had bypassed the main entrance to avoid the press and slipped in through a kitchen corridor. He looked disheveled. His tie was crooked, his hair was wild, and his eyes were manic. Serafina was standing on the balcony overlooking the Temple of Dendur, alone for a moment, while her father spoke to a senator. "Sarah," Harrison hissed, emerging from the shadows of an Egyptian pillar. Serafina didn't flinch. She turned, resting her hands on the stone railing. "You shouldn't be here, Harrison. This area is for VIPs. "Stop it," he snapped, marching up to her. He looked around to make sure they were alone, then lowered his voice. "Stop this act. Okay, you made your point. You embarrassed me. You won. Are you happy?" "I'm not acting, Harrison," she said calmly. "Why didn't you tell me?" he demanded, his voice rising in incredulous anger. 3 years, Serafina. 3 years we slept in the same bed. You let me worry about mortgage payments. You let me stress about box office numbers, while you were sitting on this. He gestured wildly at her, at the invisible billions she represented. You lied to me. I didn't lie, Serafina said. I omitted. Because I needed to know. Know what? If you loved me, she said, her voice trembling slightly, the only crack in her armor. My father warned me about men like you, men who love the light but hate the bulb. I wanted to be sure, so I became plain Sarah. I supported you. I cooked your meals. I listened to your lines until 4 a.m. I gave you everything I had. She stepped closer to him. And you became smaller, Harrison. You got a taste of fame, and it made you mean. You treated me like an accessory that had gone out of style. Tonight wasn't about the money. It was about respect. You were going to leave me on that red carpet. You were going to let the world laugh at me while you went off with Verity. I wasn't, Harrison lied, desperate. It was just PR. It's the business, Sarah. You know how it works. I know exactly how it works. She cut him off. That's why I bought the business. Harrison stared at her. He saw the resolve in her eyes. He realized the quiet girl he had bullied was gone. He switched tactics. He fell to his knees, right there on the balcony in his Tom Ford tuxedo. Sarah, please, he begged, grabbing her hand. The diamonds on her dress scratched his palm. I'm sorry, I was an idiot. I was stressed. I love you. You know I love you. Don't throw us away. We can be a power couple. Think about it. You and me running Hollywood. We'd be unstoppable. King and queen. Serafina looked down at him. It was a pathetic sight. There is no us, Harrison, she whispered. I filed the papers this morning, before the gala. Harrison froze. What divorce, she said. Irreconcilable differences. And since we signed a prenup that you insisted on to protect your meager millions from me, you get nothing. You leave with what you came with. Harrison stood up slowly, his face twisting into ugliness again. You can't do that. I made you relevant. No one knew you before me, and no one will remember you after me, she replied. I'll fight you, Harrison spat. I'll go to the press. I'll tell them you're a fraud, a liar who trapped me. Go ahead, Serafina said. gesturing to the hall below where hundreds of cameras were waiting. "Go tell them. But remember, Harrison, I own the ink. I own the paper. And as of tonight, I own the cameras." She leaned in close, her lips brushing his ear. "Check your phone, Harrison. TMZ just broke the story about Verity Vane's emails. The ones where she calls your fans brainless cattle and mocks the studio head." Harrison scrambled for his phone. His hands shook as he unlocked it. "Who do you think leaked them?" Serafina whispered, pulling back with a cold smile. Harrison looked up from his screen, horror in his eyes. You destroyed her." "I'm just clearing the board," Serafina said, turning back to the party. "Now get out of my sight. Before I have security, throw you out the service entrance." Harrison opened his mouth to speak, but the sound of heavy footsteps approached. Alistair Auclair appeared flanked by 2 guards. "Is this man bothering you, chairwoman?" Alistair asked. "He was just leaving," Serafina said. Harrison looked at Alistair, then at Serafina. He realized he was outgunned, outspent, and outclassed. He turned and fled, disappearing into the shadows, a king without a crown. Serafina took a deep breath. She felt lighter. The weight of the secret and the weight of the bad marriage was gone. "Are you ready for the toast, my dear?" Alistair asked gently. "Yes, Papa," she said. "I'm ready to start." But as they turned to head back to the ballroom, a man stepped out from the crowd near the doorway. He wasn't a celebrity. He wasn't a reporter. He was tall with dark, messy hair and a tuxedo that looked like he'd slept in it. He held a glass of whiskey and looked at Serafina with amused curiosity. It was Sebastian Thorne, the owner of Iron Press Media, the only media conglomerate Alistair Auclair didn't own, and the only man in New York who had never been afraid of the Auclair family. "That was quite a show," Sebastian drawled, blocking their path. "Vicious. I like it." Serafina narrowed her eyes. "Move, Sebastian." "Or what?" he smirked. "You'll buy my company too." "I might," she countered. "You can try." Sebastian stepped closer, ignoring Alistair's glare. "But I'm not Harrison. I don't sell for cheap." He raised his glass in a mock toast. "Welcome to the Shark Tank, Serafina. Let's see if you can swim." The elevators at Paramount Zenith Studios were not used to silence. Usually they buzzed with the frantic energy of assistants, agents, and producers pitching million-dollar ideas. But on this Monday morning, the silence was heavy, thick with the scent of fear and fresh coffee. Serafina Auclair stepped out of the executive elevator on the 40th floor. She wasn't wearing the midnight blue of the gala, nor the diamonds. She wore a tailored white suit, sharp enough to cut glass with her hair pulled back in a severe, no-nonsense chignon. Behind her walked a phalanx of 6 lawyers and her father's head of security. She didn't walk to the CEO's office. She walked straight to the boardroom. Inside, the remaining executives of the studio were waiting. They looked like schoolboys called to the principal's office. At the far end of the table sat Harrison. He was wearing sunglasses indoors, trying to project an air of unbothered cool, but his foot was tapping a nervous rhythm against the leg of the mahogany table. Rupert Stone, the CEO, stood up as she entered. "Ms. Auclair, we have prepared the reports you asked for." "Sit down, Rupert," Serafina said, placing a single leather folder on the table. She remained standing at the head of the table. "Let's skip the pleasantries," she began, her voice projecting to the back of the room without effort. "I have reviewed the studio's financials over the weekend. They are a disaster. Bloated budgets, vanity projects, and marketing campaigns based on ego rather than analytics." She slid the folder toward Harrison. Which brings me to Titan's Fall. Harrison took off his sunglasses. His eyes were bloodshot. The movie is a guaranteed hit, Sarah. You can't cancel it. It's in post-production. You've already spent $200 million on it. Correction, Serafina said coldly. The studio spent $200 million, and according to our internal projections which my team ran last night, the film is tracking for a 60% loss. That's impossible. Harrison slammed his hand on the table. I'm the star. The people love me. The people. Serafina signaled to one of her lawyers who projected a graph onto the wall screen. Currently view you as toxic. Since Saturday night, your favorability rating has dropped 40 points. You are trending Harrison, but not in the way you want. The hashtags #Team Serafina and #Harrison. The user have more engagement than your movie trailer. Harrison stared at the screen. The red line of his career was plummeting like a stone. We are reshooting the third act, Serafina announced, and we are recasting the lead role. The room gasped. You can't, Harrison shouted, standing up. I have a contract. Pay or play. If you fire me, you still have to pay me my $20 million. Serafina smiled. It was the smile of a predator who had already checked the traps. Page 42, Section C, Paragraph 5 of your contract, Serafina recited from memory. The morality clause. If the principal actor engages in conduct that brings public disrepute, scandal, or ridicule to the studio, the contract is voided without compensation. Scandal, Harrison sputtered. I didn't commit a crime. I just introduced my girlfriend on a carpet. You publicly humiliated the new owner of the studio, Serafina said softly. You created a narrative that made the studio look incompetent for hiring you. That is disrepute. That is ridicule. She leaned forward, her hands flat on the table. You're fired, Harrison. And since you breached the morality clause, we will be suing you to recoup the cost of the reshoots. My lawyers will serve you the papers on your way out. Security will escort you to your car. Harrison looked around the room for support. Rupert Stone looked down at his shoes. The other executives pretended to read their tablets. He was alone. You'll regret this, Harrison hissed, grabbing his jacket. You think you can run this town just because Daddy bought you a toy. This is Hollywood, Sarah. We eat nice girls for breakfast. Good thing I'm not nice anymore, she replied. As Harrison was dragged out by security, shouting threats that echoed down the hallway, the heavy oak doors swung open again. A slow, sarcastic clapping filled the room. Leaning against the doorframe was Sebastian Cross. The man from the gala, the media mogul who owned Iron Press, the one entity the Auclairs didn't control. He was wearing a dark grey suit, no tie, and that same infuriating smirk. Bravo, Sebastian said, pushing off the doorframe and walking into the room uninvited. That was visceral. I almost felt bad for the guy. Almost. Mr. Cross, Serafina said, her posture stiffening. This is a closed board meeting. You are not a shareholder. No. Sebastian agreed, pulling out a chair next to Rupert and sitting down, putting his feet up on the empty seat next to him. But I am the owner of the international distribution rights for Titan's Fall. Your father sold them to me 3 years ago when he thought the movie was a lemon. He wanted to hedge his bets. Serafina froze. She looked at her lawyers. One of them nodded nervously. So, Sebastian continued, checking his watch. While you own the movie, I own the screens in Europe, Asia, and South America. That means you can't reshoot the film without my approval, unless you want to release it only in North America and lose. What, 400 million? Serafina's eyes narrowed. What do you want, Sebastian? I want a seat at the table." Sebastian said, his eyes locking onto hers. They were dark, intelligent, and dangerous. "I don't care about Harrison, Angela. He's a prop, but I care about my investment. You want to reshoot, fine, but I get final cut on the new version, and I get to approve the new lead." "Absolutely not," Serafina shot back. "I run this studio." "You own the building, princess," Sebastian said, his voice dropping an octave. "But you don't run the town. Not yet. You need me. If I pull the distribution, your stock tanks and your father's little acquisition becomes $1 billion write-off. Do you really want your first act as chairwoman to be the biggest failure in the company's history?" The tension in the room was electric. The board members held their breath. This wasn't a celebrity spat. This was a collision of empires. Serafina looked at Sebastian. She saw the challenge in his eyes. He wasn't intimidated by her name. He wasn't impressed by her money. He was playing the game. "Fine," Serafina said through gritted teeth. "You can consult on the casting, but I make the final call." Sebastian stood up, smoothing his jacket. He walked over to her, stopping just inside her personal space. He smelled of expensive scotch and cedarwood. "We'll see," he whispered. "Welcome to the big leagues, Mrs. Angela. Oh, wait, Ms. Auclair." He turned and walked out, leaving the room in a stunned silence. Serafina gripped the edge of the table until her knuckles turned white. She had handled the ex-husband. Now she had to handle the wolf. 2 weeks later, the victory at the gala felt like a distant memory. The reality of running a sinking studio was a daily grind of crisis management. Serafina hadn't slept more than 4 hours a night. She was living in her office fueled by espresso and sheer willpower. She had successfully scrubbed Harrison from the marketing materials, but the media war was far from over. Harrison hadn't gone quietly. He had gone on The Joe Verdict, the most popular podcast in the country. For 3 hours he had played the victim. He painted Serafina not as a scorned wife, but as a manipulative heiress who had trapped him, used him for his connections, and then discarded him when she got bored. He claimed the reveal at the gala was a premeditated stunt to humiliate him and boost the studio's stock price. "She's cold, man," Harrison had told the host, wiping away a fake tear. "She never loved me. She was just an undercover boss waiting to fire me." The public was fickle. While many still supported Serafina, a loud contingent of men's rights activists and Harrison's die-hard fans had started a hate campaign. They called her a corporate tyrant and a daddy's girl. Serafina was watching the clips of the interview on her office monitors when her assistant, a sharp young woman named Chloe, buzzed in. "Ms. Auclair, there's a visitor. She says it's urgent. She doesn't have an appointment." "Who is it, Chloe? I'm busy." "It's Verity Vane." Serafina paused. Her hand hovered over the end call button. "Send her in, but keep security outside the door." A moment later, Verity Vane walked in. The golden goddess of the red carpet looked very different. She was wearing oversized sunglasses, a trench coat, and flat shoes. She looked tired. Verity took off her glasses. Her eyes were puffy. "I didn't think you'd see me." "I have 5 minutes, Verity," Serafina said, not offering her a seat. "If you're here to apologize, save it. If you're here to ask for your role back in Titan's Fall, the answer is no." "I don't want the role," Verity said, her voice shaking. "I want to bury him." Serafina raised an eyebrow. "Harrison?" Verity nodded. She reached into her bag and pulled out a flash drive. "He threw me under the bus, Serafina. After the gala, when the press turned on him, he blamed me. He told his agent I seduced him. He told the tabloids I was a stalker. He got me blacklisted. My agency dropped me this morning. Verity placed the drive on the desk. This is his cloud backup. I knew his passwords. Don't ask how. What's on it? Serafina asked, staring at the small metal device. Everything, Verity whispered. The gambling debts, the illegal poker games he runs in the hills, and the audio recordings. He records everyone, Serafina, including you, and including your father. Serafina's blood ran cold. My father. There's a recording from 3 years ago, Verity said. Before you got married, Harrison met with a man. I don't know who, but they talk about Alistair. They talk about his condition. My father doesn't have a condition, Serafina said automatically. That's not what the tape says, Verity said. They talk about his heart, about how he has maybe 5 years left, and how Harrison needed to marry you to get close to the trust fund before the old man died. Serafina felt the room spin. 5 years? That was 3 years ago. Why are you giving me this? Serafina asked. Because I want him destroyed, Verity said, her eyes hard. And because you were the only one on that carpet who had any dignity. I want a job, Serafina, not as an actress. I'm done with that. I want to work in production. I want to learn how to be the one holding the leash, not the one wearing the collar. Serafina looked at Verity. She saw the desperation, but also a spark of genuine rage. If this drive is real, Serafina said, picking it up, you have a job. But if you ever cross me again, Verity, I won't just fire you. I will erase you. Deal, Verity breathed. Serafina plugged the drive into her computer. She found the file dated 3 years ago. She put on her headphones. She heard Harrison's voice, and she heard another voice, a voice that sounded familiar. Voice 2. The old lion is dying. Harrison, the doctors say his heart is a ticking clock. If you marry the girl, you're next in line for the throne. But you have to keep her docile. Harrison, she's a mouse, Sebastian. She'll do whatever I say. Serafina ripped the headphones off. Sebastian. Sebastian Cross knew. He had known for 3 years. He wasn't just a rival. He was the architect. He had encouraged Harrison. He had played both sides. Before she could process the betrayal, her office phone rang. The red line. The emergency line. She picked it up. Eau Claire. Serafina. It was her father's personal physician, Dr. Aris. His voice was panic-stricken. You need to get to Mount Sinai Hospital. Immediately. What happened? Serafina stood up the chair, toppling over behind her. It's your father. He collapsed during a meeting with the shareholders. It's massive, Serafina. He's in surgery now, but you need to come. Serafina dropped the phone. The world tilted. The condition was real. The timeline was real. She ran for the door. As she burst out into the hallway, she almost collided with someone. It was Sebastian Cross. He was holding a tablet, looking grim. Sarah, he said, using her nickname for the first time. I just heard. I'm so sorry. Serafina stopped. She looked at the man who she thought was just a business rival. She looked at the man whose voice she had just heard on a 3-year-old tape plotting her father's demise. She slapped him. It was a sound that echoed through the entire floor. A sharp, violent crack. Sebastian didn't move. He didn't touch his cheek. He just stared at her. his expression unreadable. "Stay away from me," Serafina whispered, tears finally spilling over. "Stay away from my family. If you come near the hospital, I will kill you." "Sarah, wait." Sebastian started reaching out. "Don't!" she screamed. "I know, Sebastian. I know what you did." She turned and ran toward the elevators, leaving Sebastian standing alone in the hallway. His hand half raised, a look of genuine confusion, or was it guilt on his face? As the elevator doors closed, Serafina collapsed against the metal wall. She was alone. Her father was dying. Her ex-husband was a monster. And the only man who had challenged her as an equal was a traitor who had been waiting for her empire to crumble all along. The elevator dinged. The lobby. Serafina wiped her face. She straightened her jacket. She was an Auclair, and if the empire was going to burn, she would stand in the ashes and fight until the bitter end. But as she stepped out of the building, the paparazzi were waiting. Hundreds of them. "Serafina, is it true? Is Alistair dead? Look at the stock market. Serafina Auclair Industries is crashing." She looked up at the giant ticker tape across the street. The stock was in free fall. The sharks weren't circling anymore. They were biting. The waiting room of Mount Sinai's cardiac wing felt less like a hospital and more like a place where hope went to die quietly. For 6 hours, Serafina Auclair sat in the same rigid vinyl chair, her hands folded in her lap, staring at a crack in the pale linoleum floor. It ran like a fault line beneath her feet, thin and crooked, as if even the building itself were fractured. Beyond the glass doors, machines whispered and beeped in steady, indifferent rhythms. Somewhere behind them, her father lay unconscious, kept alive by wires and chemicals. Massive myocardial infarction, stress-induced. The next 24 hours are critical. The doctor's words replayed in her mind on an endless loop. She no longer wore her tailored white suit. A nurse had draped a soft grey hoodie over her shoulders hours earlier, and she had accepted it without protest. In the reflection of a nearby window, she barely recognized herself. Pale, hollow-eyed, small. Not a chairwoman, not a strategist, just a frightened daughter. Her phone vibrated again on the table. She had silenced it, but the notifications refused to be ignored. Buzz. Board calls emergency vote. Buzz. Stock down 18%. Buzz. Press conference announced. Her stomach tightened. She picked up the phone and opened the live stream. Harrison stood on courthouse steps, solemn and composed, framed by microphones. He looked like a man carrying the weight of the world. "It brings me no pleasure," he said, voice heavy with false regret, to see the Auclair family in crisis. "But Serafina's recent behavior has destabilized the company. The markets are frightened. Our employees are frightened." He paused. "That's why I've partnered with the Vanguard Consortium. We intend to protect Auclair Industries from emotional mismanagement." Serafina's hand trembled. "Protect," she whispered. "Liar." She hurled the phone at the wall. It shattered fragments, sliding to the floor like broken ice. "They're stealing it," she breathed. "While he's unconscious, while I'm here." Vanguard. The name alone felt poisonous. Predators who had waited decades for weakness. Harrison had become their blade. The door creaked open. Serafina stiffened, ready for another doctor. Instead, Sebastian Cross stepped inside. He raised his hands, slightly cautious. A faint bruise darkened his cheek. "I know you told me not to come," he said, "but you need to hear this." "Get out," she snapped. "You betrayed me." "I didn't." He set his laptop on the table and opened an audio file. "You've heard part of this," he said quietly. "Now listen to all of it." He pressed play. His own voice filled the room. "The old lion is dying, Harrison. If you marry her, you'll be next in line." Serafina flinched. Then the recording continued, "which is exactly what a parasite like you would think. But she isn't weak. She has steel in her blood. If you try to cage her, she will burn you alive." Harrison's voice followed, laughing nervously. "She eats out of my hand. Then you are already dead." The file ended. Silence flooded the room. Serafina stared at the screen, breath shallow. You were warning him," she whispered. "I was betting on you," Sebastian replied. She sank back into her chair, tears rising not from grief but relief. "They're voting at 5, she said hoarsely. "They'll remove me." "I know. I can't fight them. My assets are frozen." Sebastian slid a black folder across the table. "Then don't fight alone. Inside was a merger agreement. Iron Press Media, or Claire Industries, a poison pill," he explained. "Sign this, and my resources become yours. Vanguard won't survive it." She looked at him. "Why help me?" "Because I don't want scraps," he said softly. "I want a partner." Serafina closed her eyes. She thought of Harrison's smirk, of the grey mouse, of everything she had endured. Then she picked up the pen. "If you betray me," she said, "signing I'll destroy you." Sebastian smiled faintly. "I'd expect nothing less." And that is the story of Serafina Auclair, a woman who learned that sometimes you have to lose the person you thought you loved to find the power you always had. From the red carpet humiliation to the boardroom domination, she proved that the best revenge isn't just looking good. It's taking over the whole damn studio. What did you think of Serafina's revenge? Did Harrison get what he deserved, or was he let off too easy? And do we trust Sebastian, or is he just the next problem waiting to happen? Let me know your theories in the comments below. If you enjoyed this saga of betrayal, billions, and sweet revenge, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a story. I'll see you in the next video with another tale of scandal and redemption. Thanks for watching.